right? So I want to make a video updating some other very
big important news stories that I want to talk about as well. So let's get right into it here. Um, Canada is up to 1,708 cases. Canada as a whole seems to be trending down a little bit, but I seen Ontario had 260 cases yesterday, which is a 15% jump in one day, which is very surprising. Alberta had just 29, which is the lowest it's been since I've been making videos about this, which is I think is about just over a week now. I've been making videos about this for over a week, and I think the lowest has been in the 30s. So our cases have trended down for 3 days in a row now. My guess is that it won't trend down tomorrow because 29 is a very low number. But again, if we could keep the numbers down, um, this is going to get better because again we're about exactly 2 weeks, depending. I mean, most places it was as of 3 Mondays ago, so I mean it's Tuesday, so we're just over 2 weeks into this whole quarantine thing. So that's good news that the numbers aren't still going up. But again, you wanna give it at least 3, 4, 5 days to recognize a trend. It's only been 2 days. You never know. Tomorrow we could have like 80 cases again. Certain areas, it's kind of weird. Like I went grocery shopping this morning, at like 11 o'clock, and it was very quiet. And 2 weeks ago, when I went right after most businesses shut down, it was as busy as I've ever seen it, and that was during the week, and that was before everybody's work got shut down. Like it was on a Friday, and then I went again on like a Tuesday, the first Tuesday into the quarantine, and those were two like really busy days. And again, the Friday was a Friday, and that was before most people's work got shut down, and it was during the day. So it was incredibly busy when this first got started. Now it seems like things are quieting down. It seems like people are still taking this a little more, or starting to take it a little more seriously, at least from what I can tell. But again, I see some of these stories of parties and massive gatherings still, but we'll see. If other places want to screw themselves over, then whatever. But here, we want to continue to bring this down because again, if we give it another week or two and we just again grit your teeth, defer your gratification, we could all be back. I mean, at least in Alberta, in the Edmonton area, maybe not in Calgary because they got so many cases. We could be back at work in 2 weeks. Like that's not that bad. Most businesses could open back up again. But again, that's probably best case scenario. My guess is probably early May would be where we're actually going to be at, which really sucks because that's another 4 weeks. But again, best case scenario I'd say be about 2 weeks. Worst case, I mean at least a month, but I don't want to get into worst case because that's pretty scary to think about. Again, Calgary is pretty much the main area you got to worry about. Edmonton, you definitely still have to be cautious. Other than that, there's very few cases. Um, there's about 1,000 people that got tested yesterday in Alberta, and again, just 29 of them test positive, or tested positive. So again, if you think you might have it, it's pretty unlikely that you have it. But again, it's up to you if you want to go get tested. If you have a bad immune system, definitely go get tested because you want to know. But if you're a young, healthy person, the chances of dying are like 1 in 1,000. So it's not a must, but again, it's completely up to you. But anyway, that is the case numbers. Again, it's looking pretty good in Alberta, but again, Ontario is way up. So if you're in Ontario, then you're not looking as good, but Alberta's looking really good. But again, you want to wait at least 3 or 4 days to mark a trend. One day is not a trend. But anyway, let's get to some other stuff here. This is from Stefan Molyneux. He goes on to say they couldn't see coronavirus coming, even with clear warning, but I'm sure they'll totally know what the temperature will be in 100 years. And again, I wanted to talk about this because number one, the carbon tax is being jacked up tomorrow, and number two, it just goes to expose the whole idea of the whole climate change agenda. The whole idea of climate change is that their whole aspect of wanting the carbon tax and all this kind of stuff is that, well, number one, we can accurately predict the temperature, which they clearly haven't done. None of their, I mean, I wouldn't say none, but a very small percentage of their predictions have came true. I mean, just look back at history, which is why whenever you bring up the, in a debate, the whole climate change thing, people get rather quiet, and they immediately jump to change the subject whenever you bring that up, because that's one of the best arguments against climate change. And I would say it's pretty much the only argument you need to know that, hey, even if it's a thing, these people are not getting anything right, and listening to them is crazy. Even if they're right, it's just by luck, it's just by chance that they're right. And but given the fact that the overwhelming majority of their predictions have been wrong, I think it's pretty safe to say that they're wrong until further evidence can come out. But again, this is important stuff. But again, it makes zero sense that you had countries warning about it. You had China, welding people in their rooms. Their death toll and their the amount of people exposed was clearly higher than they were talking. You had, I mean, like I say, they brought it up in the House of Commons on January 29th that countries were starting to restrict or ban travel from China, and they didn't listen. They didn't listen. They're more worried about BS political correctness. And again, we're suffering the consequences for it now. Anyway, this is from Kian Bexty. He goes on to say Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney in a public town hall just said China lied to the world. The virus has caused a political realignment. Politicians are now in two camps, those who blindly support China, which would be included with the World Health Organization and the UN, which Justin Trudeau is clearly in, and then two, people who don't. And that's something to say too, that if this isn't enough, a good enough example to be against China, to be against the World Health Organization, UN, open borders, globalism, then I don't know what is. Because if, hundreds of thousands of people dying, the economy being at a standstill, people's life savings, being at stake, isn't enough to get you to change your mind, then literally nothing short of, World War III, hundreds of millions of people dying would get you to change your mind. Like that's all I can say as far as that stuff goes. And like I said, this goes to show just how partisan people are. And again, it really bothers me that, open borders is, number one, it was a flawed ideology to begin with, and now it's clearly an even more flawed ideology, and yet you still can't get people to admit that it's a bad idea. At least the people that support it. Like, again, that's something that bothers me. There's just nothing you can say to change some of these people's minds. Anyway, this is from Maxime Bernier. He goes on to say, unbelievable bullshit. Setting aside money for a rainy day is the exact opposite of what the government did. They had record spending increases. The economy was growing, and yet they even broke their promise of small deficits and quick return to balanced budgets. And again, this is something that's very important, because not only did Justin Trudeau lie, they never set aside money for a rainy day. If setting aside money for a rainy day was something that was important to you, you wouldn't run massive deficits. Like that, it's completely contradictory ideas. So again, just flat out lies. I mean, again, I want to make something clear too. I really don't like constantly ragging on Justin Trudeau, but the guy puts his foot in his mouth so much that I just can't. I can't let it go. And the other thing too is that the media is so biased in Canada, well, everywhere for that matter, but Canada, um, bias in favor of him, that is, that you need people calling him out. And if that means that people like me need to harp on him 24/7, then so be it. Because until the mainstream media is more neutral in this, like once the mainstream media is neutral in the subject, I would make much less videos about Justin Trudeau. But until that happens, which again, it's never going to happen, um, until that happens, I'm going to keep doing it. And again, this is just terrible. The fact that they're just flat out lying to people, and again, it's just to appear like they're smart too. Like I seen a good, they were talking about Joe Biden and his supporters, and it was from Tim Pool, and he said, are Joe Biden supporters just stupid people pretending to be smart, or smart people pretending to be stupid? And I just thought it was funny, because it's a good way of looking at politics nowadays. That's basically what it is that I would say on the left, I would say it's the same, except the left is worse for this kind of stuff. They're mostly just stupid people pretending to be smart, because if they're smart people, then they wouldn't have such terrible arguments. They would have facts and reason behind their arguments, not emotion. And but the thing that I want to clarify is that the politicians are almost always smart people pretending to be stupid. Because if they're smart, again, they wouldn't support the idea of massive deficits. They wouldn't support socialism, all this kind of stuff. Because anybody who has the slightest amount of understanding of economics would understand that most of these systems are flawed as can possibly be. Like, I've taken economics courses. This is stuff you learn in the first week or two of it. That I mean, they don't directly tie it into the political realm, but they tie it into, in business or in if you're running a company or whatever. It's just simple stuff. You can't. It's simple economics. You can't continuously run massive deficits year after year after year. You can't, for example, bring in 1 million people every 2 or 3 years and not drastically increase housing. When the housing demand or the housing the amount of housing available stays the same, and the amount of people that are available wanting the housing goes way up, well, guess what? The prices are going to go way up, and you're going to screw everyone. That's a simple for thing you learn in the first week of economics kind of stuff that Justin Trudeau doesn't seem to understand. Now, again, I don't think he doesn't understand it. He just knows that his followers don't understand it, and he has to pretend like he's on their level, basically. And again, that's just something I wanted to bring up because, again, it really bothers me. The last thing I want to talk about here is from Brian Lilly. Now, he goes on to say, tomorrow MPs will take a pay raise and hike your taxes. Well, many wonder how they'll pay rent or the mortgage, wonder when they'll be able to go back to work. Again, this is just the level of where we're at in Canada, too. And the amount of people that go along with this, like, it's just sheer Stockholm syndrome. Like, it's just sheer Stockholm syndrome that they'll defend this kind of stuff, too. The one thing that really, another, well, one of the millions of things, but that bothers me about these leftists is whenever they hear of a CEO or someone like that in the somewhat free market who makes a lot of money, and they'll always harp on it, but you never hear these leftists complain about a politician who has a net worth 20, 30, 40 million dollars. Do you ever hear them complain about those kind of people? No, you never do. I mean, look at the Nancy Pelosi's, those kind of people. They've been a career, 150, $200,000 a year salary, but yet they have net worths of $50 million. Like, look at the Clintons, they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They've never made nearly that much. So again, how did they make that money? How did they make that money? There's clearly shady stuff going on there, but yet you have these lefties that never seem to bring that up. They don't care. Again, it just comes back to my theory. The reason why the left hates oil and gas so much, all this kind of stuff, is that they hate what, number one, they hate the free market and they hate anything that appears like the free market, which is why they hate corporations so much. When they think corporations are the free market, which they aren't, but they perceive them of being, so that's why they hate them so much. And they'll always defend government because when you're on the left, the main goal, in the big picture, the main goal of the left is the increased size and power of the government, which means you can't criticize the government at all costs. You can only criticize the government when you perceive them as wanting to reduce the amount of government power, which is why you have the left seem to harp so much on, take for example Jason Kenney in Alberta when he wants to cut education or healthcare, which he doesn't want to cut healthcare. He is cutting education, to be fair, but again, education is a bloated system. Healthcare is both way bloated, like extremely bloated. They both should be cut by quite a bit, but again, that's besides the point. They hate that because again, that's reducing the size and power of government. They don't care about the morals and ethics and the jobs that are lost. There's over 100,000 people that lost their jobs in the private sector or the oil and gas sector. They couldn't care less about those people, but what, 2, 3 thousand teachers and nurses lost their jobs and they think it's the worst thing ever? Again, do you understand the difference between 3,000, whatever it was, 4,000, I've heard upwards of 5,000, and 200, 100,000 people? Do you understand the difference? Do you know how much of it? That's 50, 100 times the amount of people we're looking at. But yet they don't care. They don't care. So again, just wanted to bring that up again. Just the level of tone deafness and all this kind of stuff. It just bothers me so much that, again, tomorrow taxes go up. Again, MPs, politicians, they get a raise. They're giving themselves a raise, for the simple reason that, number one, they're pumping the economy full of money, which is, again, inflation, which hurts anybody who is on a fixed salary, which is the overwhelming majority of people, or an hourly salary, and they don't care. Not only that, they're raising taxes, the carbon tax. So again, as of tomorrow, your money is worth less, and they get more, and no one seems to care. No one seems to care. Imagine, looking at all these lefties in Alberta, for example, and again, if you're a conservative or even a non-lefty in Alberta, you'll realize this, that imagine if Jason Kenney raised his salary, or even MP's salaries in Alberta. The left would be all over him. It would be front page news, all this kind of stuff. It'd be number one, topic for them on Twitter and Facebook and all this kind of crap. But yet Justin Trudeau doesn't. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And again, if Jason Kenney did it, I would disagree with it too. But the reason why I don't criticize the right as much, even though I'm not a conservative, is that the right receives more than their fair share of criticism. The mainstream media, the public schools, the universities, overwhelmingly biased to the left. Overwhelmingly biased to the left. In universities, left wing professors outweigh right wing professors like 10 to 1, which is, again, diversity that the left doesn't seem to care about, but that's another story for a different time. But again, for people that are wondering, in case you haven't figured it out yet, that's why. The day, like I say, the day that the mainstream media is honest and objective and unbiased, I'll stop harping on the left so much. But again, until that happens, I'm going to keep doing it. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. I do have my PayPal link in the description. I do have an email address for e-transfer. I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will be releasing a second video later today, so stay tuned for that as well.